I'm Deontay Jenkins, and here's what's on my mind. A few weeks ago, I got a DM from somebody asking me what are the most difficult aspects of screenwriting. Specifically, what are the most difficult aspects to me? Now, generally speaking, I don't think there's one thing or a set of things that are more difficult than the other when I'm writing a screenplay. It honestly depends on what the screenplay is. Every screenplay brings a different challenge. But I thought about it for a minute, and I didn't want to just leave her ass out. When she asked me a very specific question. She wanted 5 things that I felt were the most difficult. And I can't really answer that question. But I can say the things that are most important to pay attention to. And because I'm not good at following rules, there's 6 of them. So, here you go. But before we get into that, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Be sure to turn on that notification bell to know when I'm uploading any new content. You can follow me here on social media if you have any questions or anything you want me to do a video on. And you can check out my latest short films here. And now that that's out of the way, screenwriting. I haven't done a screenwriting video in a long time. I'm kind of excited. Now, the first thing you need to pay attention to is structure. Structure is one of those things that's not one size fits all. And finding the right structure for your screenplay is crucial. Most people will tell you to cling to the 3-act structure and never let go. But that's so limiting. There's so many different structures out there that you can use. And it all depends on the screenplay that you're writing and the story that you're telling. There are so many structures out there. Structures like the episodic structure, the non-linear structure, the fabula structure, the hyperlink structure, the multiple timeline structure, the real-time structure, just to name a few. I found though that most script coverage and script readers want you for some reason to stick to the 3-act structure. Now don't get me wrong, you need to master the 3-act structure before you can move on to any other kind of structure. Because all of the structures that I named before use elements of the 3-act structure, but they do their own thing with it. It's honestly super disappointing and super close-minded to only consider the 3-act structure the right way to go. All of those films that you saw flash on the screen before uses different types of structure, not just the 3-act structure. Finding the right structure for your story is critical, and once you've found it, you'll be able to tell that story to the maximum of its potential. True character. We as writers often fall into the trap of confusing true character with characterization. As the writer, we need to understand better than anybody the true character of our subjects. The characterization is simply what we see on the surface. You know, the bad boy, the pretty girl, the workaholic, the asshole, and whatever other character archetypes there are out there. Those are just characterizations. The true character comes from the decisions that those characters make. Decisions that can contradict the decisions that they've made before in the story, and decisions that often contradict the characterization of the character. A story is nothing but a series of decisions by a character. Each decision gives us a little bit more insight on who the character is. However, we often fool ourselves into thinking that the characterization of the subject is their true character. It's not. The true character of a subject is shown when they're confronted with conflict and they're forced to make a decision, right or wrong. We can't fool ourselves into thinking that the characterization is the true character of a subject, because we can't fool the audience. They'll know if something's phony or just surface level. Dialogue. Not all dialogue is appropriate for every type of screenplay. Some dialogue is witty, some dialogue is dramatic, some dialogue is pretty straightforward. Knowing when to execute on each type of dialogue is very important to making your characters seem more realistic. And it'll set your screenplay apart from everyone else's. It's really as simple as learning how to not waste words. If every word has a purpose, that purpose being to drive the character or the story forward, then there will be no wasted dialogue, and every bit of dialogue will fit perfectly. And it'll fit perfectly every single time. New screenwriters have a tendency to overwrite dialogue and lean very heavily on the wit. They see screenwriters like Quentin Tarantino and think just because his characters wax on about pop culture and whatever other random things are on their mind, they should do the same. What they often fail to realize though is that his dialogue serves a larger purpose. Take for instance this scene from Pulp Fiction when Vincent and Jules are about to enter the apartment. They're talking about Marcellus Wallace. This isn't a waste of dialogue because it builds on what they're doing in the screenplay. Not only does that dialogue reveal exposition in a very subtle way, but it builds on the concept of the film in the scene, which is that criminals, no matter how rough and how tough, are really just everyday people. Be a wordsmith. Take the time and really go over every sentence, every syllable, and make sure it fits and works perfectly. Exposition. Piggybacking on the dialogue, exposition is another thing that should be focused on. Never should a writer ever just hand out exposition. There's always a way to give the audience the information they need to know without treating them like children who don't know how movies work. This is where you get the as you know dialogue. If they know, then why are you saying it? Writers should bury their exposition in moments that seem unimportant or that have multiple purposes. If you must straight up tell the audience what the exposition is, then there needs to be a character in the scene or the story that is just as clueless as the audience. For instance, how the wizarding world is constantly being explained to Harry Potter. He didn't grow up in the world, so he needs to learn, which in turn teaches the audience.
You're a wizard, Harry.
And gives the exposition a purpose within the story rather than just a wink and a nod at the audience. Like, you got that? This is what you need to know. Endings and climaxes. Everything is building to something else. And a lot of screenplays don't take advantage of this. The way you end your story is the thing that the audience remembers the most. A writer should take their time to build to the climactic moments, even if that means going back and adding things that will eventually lead to a climax. It's always disappointing to read a screenplay or watch a film that fizzles out at the end because the screenwriter didn't earn the ending or they didn't build to a memorable climax. You want your ending to be strong and memorable. If what you're writing is good, there's really only one way that the story can end. Everything in your story builds to that one ending. And that's not to say that that ending is predictable. On the contrary, if you plotted out your screenplay to build to the climactic moments and you've left just breadcrumbs and a little bit of information throughout to build to that ending, nobody will see it coming. Scene transition. Each scene should have a purpose, and that purpose is to build upon the story. You cannot enter a scene and exit a scene in the exact same way, or else the scene has no purpose. For instance, if a scene starts off with people happy and in love, it cannot end that way. Going under the assumption that the scene is about their love, if you start and end the same way, then that scene is boring and it serves no purpose. It has no conflict. Story is conflict. Something needs to happen to change the positions that our characters are in. We need conflict to move scenes, acts, and stories in new directions. A lot of times new writers will write dialogue-filled scenes that serve no purpose just to hear themselves speak through their characters. This is what makes a screenplay boring and a film unwatchable. If things aren't changing from scene to scene and new conflicts aren't being introduced, nothing is happening. If a character status isn't moving from one opposite to the other, then the scene is pointless. Screenwriters always need to focus on how to transition from the beginning of the scene to the end of the scene. How to take the character from one position to another. And that's done with conflict. Now, like I said before, every screenplay brings new challenges. There's no overarching thing that you can just use for each one of your screenplays. But these things are things that you really need to pay attention to, because if you don't, your screenplay will fall flat. If any of these elements are missing, then you likely have a bad screenplay. I promise you, take my advice on this and it'll elevate your screenplay to the next level and set your stories apart from the fray. But then again, what do I know? Thanks again for watching, guys. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Follow me here on social media. I'm trying to put out new videos every week, so stay tuned. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and stay locked into what's going on this channel. If you like the content here, share it with a friend. You can follow me here on social media, and be sure to come back next week because I think you're pretty cool. Peace.